The air inside the hangar of His Majesty's aircraft carrier is thick with the smell of oil, salt water, and the tense energy that precedes a war. Light gleams off the polished metal skins of the fleet's new pride, sleek, aggressive monoplanes with retractable landing gear and enclosed cockpits. They are the future, swift, deadly, and built for a new kind of war that will be fought at terrifying speeds. They represent progress, engineering prowess, and the sharp, clean edge of modern lethality. And then, pushed into a corner as if by apology, sits the hero of our story, the Fairey Swordfish. To call it an anachronism would be an understatement. It is a relic, a ghost of a bygone era. A biplane. Its fuselage is covered not in stressed aluminum, but in fabric, stretched taut like the skin of a drum. Its landing gear is fixed, jutting out with a stubborn lack of aerodynamics. The cockpit is open to the elements, exposing its three-man crew to the biting winds of the North Atlantic. It is a machine that would have looked perfectly at home in the final days of the Great War, yet here it is, on the precipice of the Second. The young, ambitious pilots of the Fleet Air Arm, eager to get their hands on the powerful new fighters and bombers, look at the Swordfish with a mixture of pity and ironic affection. Amongst themselves, they have names for it. Some, with a gallows humor that only fighting men can truly appreciate, call it the flying coffin. It's a nod to its agonizingly slow speed and seeming vulnerability in a sky that will soon be filled with Messerschmitts. Others, however, call it the Stringbag. This name is born not of contempt, but of a grudging respect for its sheer versatility. Like a shopper's string bag, it seems you can hang almost anything from its frame, a torpedo, bombs, depth charges, mines, even extra fuel tanks, and the old plane will dutifully haul it into the air. It is a workhorse, not a thoroughbred, a mule amidst racehorses. This perception was not limited to the Allies. Rumors, carried on the whispers of intelligence reports and diplomatic chatter, painted a clear picture of the enemy's opinion. In the advanced engineering halls of the Third Reich, where designers were pushing the boundaries of aviation with machines of unparalleled speed and power, the Fairey Swordfish was a laughingstock. It was seen as a testament to British complacency, a joke of an aircraft. A quote, often repeated with a smirk in the carrier's ready room, was said to have originated from a senior German aircraft designer who had seen the plans for the Swordfish. This aircraft could fall apart in flight, he allegedly scoffed, but who could it possibly hit? The comment was a perfect encapsulation of the era's military dogma: speed was life, and new was always better. The Swordfish was neither. It was a lumbering giant from a forgotten age, a biplane sent to fight a monoplane's war. Its presence in the fleet's operational roster seemed to be a catastrophic oversight, a fatal miscalculation. Yet, within this ungainly, fabric-skinned frame lay a secret potential, a hidden strength born precisely from its perceived weaknesses. The very qualities that made engineers mock it, its slow speed, its simple construction, its anachronistic design, would soon become the keys to some of the most stunning and improbable victories of the war. The laughter from the enemy would soon die in their throats, replaced by disbelief and fury, as the flying coffin began its unlikely, heroic, and devastating journey. The world had judged the book by its cover, and was about to be proven fatally wrong. To understand the Fairey Swordfish is to understand a paradox. On paper, and certainly to the naked eye, it was an aircraft that had no right to be on the front lines of a major global conflict in 1939. It was a biplane in an age of ascendant monoplanes, a creature of wood, wire, and fabric in a world rapidly embracing the sleek invulnerability of all-metal construction. Its design seemed to be a deliberate rejection of progress. The most glaringly obsolete feature was its fixed, non-retractable landing gear. Protruding stubbornly into the airflow, the spatted wheels created immense drag, permanently shackling the aircraft to a plodding pace. While the world's premier fighters were pushing speeds of over 300 miles per hour, the Swordfish struggled to exceed 140 miles per hour with a torpedo slung under its belly. It was, quite literally, slower than some of the trains running across the European continent it was meant to fly over. The cockpit offered no sanctuary from this glaring antiquity. Open to the ferocious elements, it subjected its three-man crew, pilot, observer, and telegraphist/airgunner, to the freezing spray of the sea and the howling wind of the slipstream. While German and even other British pilots were being sealed into enclosed canopies, the crew of a swordfish had to endure the physical misery of their environment, communicating through a speaking tube system that felt as dated as the aircraft's structure. That structure itself was a throwback, a metal frame, primarily steel tubing, over which was stretched a taut skin of doped Irish linen. This fabric covering, while light, was tragically vulnerable to enemy fire and the ravages of weather, requiring constant maintenance from the carrier's exhausted ground crews. In every conceivable metric of modern aircraft design, speed, altitude, armament, and survivability, the Swordfish appeared to be a relic, a museum piece accidentally wheeled onto the active flight deck. Yet, it was precisely within this collection of perceived flaws that the aircraft's secret strength, its unique character, resided. Its laughably low speed, a product of its biplane configuration and immense drag, made it an exceptionally stable and forgiving platform to fly. For its primary role as a torpedo bomber, this was not a weakness but a critical asset. A successful torpedo drop required a slow, steady approach at a very low altitude. The Swordfish could perform this maneuver with an unnerving calmness, its pilots able to make minute adjustments with a level of precision impossible in the faster, more volatile monoplanes that would often struggle with stability at the edge of their stall speed. This simplicity and ease of handling made it a dark horse in the brutal calculus of naval warfare. It was dependable. It could take off from and land on the pitching, storm-tossed decks of an aircraft carrier in conditions that would have been a death sentence for higher-performance aircraft. Its rugged, simple construction also meant it could absorb a surprising amount of punishment and be patched up quickly, ready to fly another sortie while its more complex contemporaries might be grounded for extensive repairs. This rugged, do-anything nature gave rise to its affectionate, and perhaps most accurate, nickname, the Stringbag. This moniker had nothing to do with its flying characteristics and everything to do with its incredible versatility. The name came from the maze of external struts, wires, and pylons that festooned its fuselage and lower wings. To the crews, it looked like a string shopping bag of the era, a seemingly flimsy thing that could stretch to accommodate almost anything you needed to carry. And the Swordfish lived up to this name spectacularly. Naval armorers found they could hang a bewildering array of equipment from its frame. One day it might carry the standard 1,610-pound aerial torpedo for an anti-shipping strike. The next, it could be loaded with sea mines for a clandestine drop in enemy waters. For anti-submarine patrols, it could be fitted with depth charges or, later in the war, powerful rocket projectiles. It could even serve as a spotter aircraft for the fleet's guns, loitering over a target for hours thanks to its surprisingly good endurance when fitted with an extra fuel tank in the fuselage. The Swordfish became the ultimate jack of all trades. It was a torpedo bomber, a dive bomber, a reconnaissance plane, a mine layer, and a submarine hunter. May 1941. The North Atlantic is a churning chaos of gray waves and howling wind. On these violent seas, the German battleship Bismarck, the most powerful and technologically advanced warship of its time, is loose, a steel predator that has already tasted blood by sinking the mighty HMS Hood. For the British Royal Navy, the hunt for the Bismarck is not just a strategic necessity, it is a desperate quest for vengeance. But the prize is elusive, a ghost slipping through the net. As the chase stretches into its final, critical hours, the hope of the entire British fleet comes to rest on the fabric-covered wings of a handful of aircraft that seemed utterly, comically outmatched for the task. The Swordfish of HMS Ark Royal were about to fly into legend. The conditions for the attack were appalling, a pilot's nightmare of gale-force winds, low-hanging clouds, and a sea so rough it threatened to swallow ships whole. To even launch the biplanes from the pitching deck of the carrier was an act of supreme airmanship. For the crews, huddled in their open cockpits against the freezing spray, the target ahead was not just a ship, it was a fortress. The Bismarck represented the pinnacle of German naval engineering, bristling with a formidable array of anti-aircraft guns, all linked to a highly sophisticated fire control system. On paper, a slow-moving biplane attacking this floating citadel of steel was a suicide mission. The outcome seemed preordained. As the Swordfish squadron broke through the squalls and the monstrous silhouette of the Bismarck appeared below, the sky erupted. A scene of unimaginable ferocity unfolded. The battleship's main guns, designed to obliterate enemy cruisers from miles away, fired massive shells that sent towering plumes of water into the air, while its smaller caliber anti-aircraft cannons filled the sky with a deadly curtain of flak. The roar of the explosions was constant, a deafening drumbeat of impending death. Yet, something extraordinary, something utterly unbelievable, began to happen. The lumbering swordfish, flying low and slow through this maelstrom, were surviving. The shells were exploding, but they were exploding ahead of the planes. The black puffs of flak were blossoming where the planes should have been, but weren't. The German gunners, masters of their craft, were not incompetent. Their equipment was, in fact, too good. Their advanced, computer-assisted fire control systems were designed and calibrated to calculate the speed and trajectory of a modern, fast-moving attacker, a monoplane bomber closing in at over 200 miles per hour. They simply could not comprehend a target as leisurely as the swordfish. The biplane's agonizingly slow approach speed broke their logic. The predictors would lead the target, anticipating its future position, but the swordfish was so slow that it never arrived at that predicted point of impact. The pride of German engineering was effectively seeing a ghost aircraft, firing at a space the swordfish had yet to reach. The biplanes didn't need to dodge the hail of steel, their inherent slowness was the ultimate evasion. Through this wall of misdirected fire, the swordfish pilots pressed their attack. One torpedo, dropped from an aircraft battered by the storm and the shock waves of near misses, struck the Bismarck's Achilles heel. It hit the stern, not causing catastrophic hull damage, but critically jamming the battleship's rudders. The beast was now untamable. Its propellers still drove it forward, but with its steering locked, it was forced into a slow, inexorable circle, a helpless giant. The decisive blow had been struck not by a battleship's shell or a modern bomber, but by a weapon delivered by an obsolete biplane. The fate of the Bismarck was sealed. Later, in the relative quiet of the Ark Royal's ready rooms, the pilots, numb with cold and adrenaline, tried to process their improbable victory. From the sheer absurdity of the situation, a piece of gallows humor was born that would become an anecdote passed among naval aviators for the rest of the war. The joke went, if you're ever being attacked by the Bismarck, there's no need to panic. Just make sure you become slower than a swordfish, and you'll be perfectly safe. It was a wry tribute to the day when the greatest perceived weakness of their flying coffin had become its most powerful and history-altering weapon. While the epic hunt for the Bismarck would become the swordfish's most famous single exploit, it was by no means the beginning or the end of its extraordinary combat career. The Stringbag's saga was written in the cold waves of the North Sea, under the Mediterranean moon, and in the grim, relentless struggle for the Atlantic. Its service was a testament to relentless, grinding warfare, often far from the headlines, where its unique capabilities were deployed with devastating effect against the fleets of both Italy and Germany. The first, and perhaps most strategically brilliant, demonstration of the swordfish's potential came on a quiet, starlit night in November 1940. The main strength of the Italian Navy, the Regia Marina, lay nestled in what it considered the impregnable harbor of Taranto in southern Italy. Confident in their layered defenses of anti-aircraft guns and torpedo nets, the crews of the modern Italian battleships felt secure. They could not have imagined that their greatest threat would come not from a rival fleet or a squadron of modern bombers, but from a handful of antiquated biplanes launched from a carrier far out in the Ionian Sea. This is where the artistic episode, the quiet prelude to destruction, unfolds. Imagine the scene, the moon casting a silver path across the placid waters of the inner harbor. The silhouettes of powerful warships rest at their moorings, silent and imposing. On the decks, sentries walk their posts, their eyes scanning the sky out of habit rather than genuine fear. What could possibly threaten them here? Then, on the edge of hearing, a faint, low drone. It is not the high-pitched scream of a fighter or the menacing growl of a modern bomber, but a sound almost like a gentle thrumming, easily lost in the lapping of the waves. They are the swordfish, approaching low and slow, their fabric wings like the wings of great, nocturnal moths. They are phantoms in the moonlight, so slow they barely register as a threat. By the time the alarms blare, it is too late. The biplanes, skimming just feet above the water, release their torpedoes, which dive into the harbor and strike the battleships with shattering force. In a few short minutes, half of Italy's battleship fleet is put out of action, crippled at anchor by an aircraft that many of their own pilots would have dismissed as a training plane. The raid on Taranto was a masterstroke, a stunning victory that would be studied by navies around the world, including, ominously, the Japanese, who would apply its lessons at Pearl Harbor a year later. Beyond this singular, spectacular success, the Swordfish became the workhorse of the Royal Navy's air arm. In the brutal, unending Battle of the Atlantic, it was a key player in the war against Germany's U-boats. Flying from the tiny, heaving decks of escort carriers, often converted merchant ships themselves, the Swordfish provided vital air cover for the vulnerable convoys. Its endurance and slow-flying capabilities made it an excellent patrol aircraft, able to loiter for hours, scanning the waves for the telltale shadow of a submerged submarine or the wake of a periscope. Armed with depth charges and later, rockets, it became a feared U-boat hunter, turning the tables on the predators of the deep. Its crews endured some of the worst weather imaginable, proving the aircraft's legendary ruggedness time and again. Its duties were endlessly varied. Swordfish squadrons were tasked with laying mines in heavily defended enemy sea lanes, a perilous nighttime task requiring precision flying at low altitudes. They engaged in running battles with agile German E-boats and destroyers in the English Channel and along the Norwegian coast. They were the eyes of the fleet, the guardians of the convoys, and the silent saboteurs of enemy harbors. And all of this leads to a little-known, yet staggering, fact that underscores the Swordfish's true legacy. When the final tallies of the war at sea were made, the Fairey Swordfish, the slow, obsolete, fabric-covered biplane that German engineers had laughed at, held a remarkable distinction. It was credited with having sunk a greater tonnage of enemy shipping than any other single type of Allied aircraft. From the battleships at Taranto to the U-boats in the Atlantic and the merchantmen in between, the flying Coffin had methodically and relentlessly bled its enemies, proving that in the hands of brave and resourceful crews, an archaic design could be the most effective weapon of all. As the war evolved, so too did the incredible story of the Fairey Swordfish. Having already proven its mastery over the waves, the seemingly obsolete biplane was about to undergo a remarkable transformation, finding a new and unexpected battlefield far from the sea spray and pitching decks of its carrier home. Its new prey would not be battleships or U-boats, but the formidable panzer divisions of the German Wehrmacht. The Stringbag, the naval workhorse, was about to be reborn as a nocturnal tank hunter. This evolution from a torpedo bomber into a ground attack aircraft, or Sturmovik, was driven by a simple but lethal innovation, the installation of racks under its sturdy biplane wings to carry rocket projectiles. These were not the sophisticated guided missiles of a later age, but simple, unguided 3-inch rockets tipped with high explosive or armor-piercing warheads. Fired in a salvo, they could saturate a target with devastating firepower, effectively turning the slow-moving Swordfish into a low-altitude artillery platform. Suddenly, the aircraft had a new set of teeth, and the German army was about to feel their bite. The chosen tactic was as audacious as it was effective: night strikes against motorized columns. By day, the skies were the domain of high-speed fighter aircraft, and the Swordfish would have been little more than a clay pigeon. But under the cloak of darkness, its greatest weaknesses once again became its most profound strengths. German armored columns, often on the move at night to avoid the attention of Allied fighter bombers, felt a sense of security. They listened for the high-pitched whine of a Messerschmitt or the roar of a Focke-Wulf, the sounds of modern air power. They were not listening for the low, almost gentle drone of a biplane's radial engine. The Swordfish would approach its target low, hugging the contours of the darkened French or Belgian countryside. Its slow speed allowed its pilots to spot and identify targets, the distinct shapes of tanks, trucks, and half-tracks in the moonlight, with a precision that was impossible for faster aircraft streaking overhead. They became ghosts in the night, their fabric wings absorbing radar signals and their slow speed making them an acoustic anomaly. For the German columns below, the first sign of an attack was often the terrifying whoosh of rockets being launched, followed an instant later by a series of shattering explosions that turned order into chaos, steel into fire. The effectiveness of these attacks, and the sheer disbelief they generated among German troops, is perfectly captured in a quote attributed to a Wehrmacht eyewitness, a sentiment that spread quickly among the embattled ground forces. "We thought that a fighter would deal with them in a minute," he recounted, "but at night, these deathly slow machines are elusive." The German anti-aircraft gunners, trained to track fast-moving targets, found themselves utterly confounded. The Swordfish were too low, too slow, and simply too surreal a threat to effectively engage in the dark. The flying Coffin had become a nocturnal phantom, untouchable and lethal. Among the British pilots of the Fleet Air Arm, this new and dangerous role was met with a characteristic blend of professionalism and wry humor. A rumor, a piece of squadron folklore often shared with a knowing smile, began to circulate, perfectly encapsulating their newfound success in this ground attack role. The legend was that for every confirmed kill of a German panzer, a bottle of gin would be awarded to the successful Swordfish crew by headquarters. While likely apocryphal, the tale of a bottle of gin for a panzer became a powerful morale booster. It turned the grim business of war into a kind of macabre sport, a testament to the improbable success of their antiquated stringbags in a deadly new game. The aircraft that was once laughed at was now not only sinking ships but was also brewing a potent cocktail of fear and destruction for Germany's finest armored divisions. To truly comprehend the legend of the Fairey Swordfish, one must look beyond the individual tales of heroism and analyze the beautiful, paradoxical secret at the heart of its success. Why did this aircraft, which on every logical metric should have been a failure, triumph so spectacularly? The answer is that the very characteristics that were perceived as its greatest weaknesses were, in the unique crucible of combat, its most potent and unanswerable strengths. What its detractors saw as flaws were, in fact, its defining features. The Swordfish's almost comically slow speed was the most frequently mocked aspect of its design, yet it was the cornerstone of its lethality. In the attack on the Bismarck, this slowness was a form of technological camouflage, a glitch in the enemy's advanced fire control matrix that its designers could never have anticipated. It was a weapon of logic against a system that ran on predictable calculations. In the night raids on Taranto or against German ground columns, this same slowness granted its pilots the invaluable gifts of time and precision. While a modern, high-speed bomber would flash over a target in a terrifying, fleeting instant, the Swordfish could loiter, identify, and aim with a deliberateness that bordered on the surreal. Its stability in flight made it an ideal platform for launching torpedoes, a task that required a steady hand and a calm approach, turning a technological deficit into a decisive tactical advantage. This success was so profoundly illogical, so contrary to the established doctrines of modern warfare, that it had a powerful psychological effect on the enemy. It bred disbelief. The machine was so anachronistic that its presence on the battlefield was often misinterpreted. This brings us to a pervasive rumor that circulated among the German survivors of the Bismarck. Many of its highly trained anti-aircraft gunners, witnessing the squadron of lumbering biplanes approaching through the storm, simply could not accept that this was the main assault. Their military minds, steeped in German technological pride, rejected the evidence of their own eyes. They believed the Swordfish had to be a trap, a deliberately slow and obvious target sent to draw their fire and exhaust their ammunition while the real threat, a squadron of modern, fast torpedo bombers, was preparing to strike from another direction. This belief that they were facing a mere distraction maneuver may have contributed to their initial confusion and the ultimate failure of their defenses. The Swordfish was so absurd a weapon that the enemy defeated themselves through sheer disbelief. In the end, the laughter died, replaced by a bitter, grudging respect. The initial mockery from the enemy, so confident in their superior engineering, turned to ash in their mouths as report after report detailed the havoc wrought by the flying Coffin. The final, undeniable irony was that the masterpiece of German naval engineering, the symbol of their martial and technological might, was brought to its knees by the one aircraft they had dismissed as a joke. After the war, when the dust had settled and the engineers of the former Third Reich began to analyze the conflict, their earlier hubris gave way to a stark admission of their folly. Their revised judgment stands as the definitive epitaph for the Swordfish's improbable legacy, a sentiment captured in a quote that circulated among Allied intelligence officers. The designers laughed at this aircraft right up until the moment it sent their best creation to the bottom. Today, long after the echoes of its battles have faded, the Fairey Swordfish occupies a unique and revered place in the annals of military history. It is no longer seen as an anachronism or a joke, but as a powerful symbol of a profound truth, that victory is often achieved not by dogmatic adherence to technological progress, but by ingenuity, courage, and the clever application of the tools at hand. The story of the Stringbag has become a classic lesson in the triumph of engineering resourcefulness over rigid doctrine. It serves as a permanent reminder that the most advanced weapon can be defeated by an opponent who refuses to play by the established rules. The Swordfish represents the ultimate underdog, an embodiment of the idea that perceived weaknesses can, with tactical brilliance, be turned into decisive strengths. Its legacy is a tribute to the pilots and crews who flew it, but also to the underappreciated virtues of simplicity, reliability, and adaptability in a world obsessed with speed and complexity. To stand before a surviving swordfish in a museum today is to experience this legacy in a tangible, almost emotional way. Imagine a vast exhibition hall, filled with the sleek, predatory shapes of modern jets, their polished fuselages and swept-back wings speaking of supersonic speed and digital lethality. And then, in a quiet corner, sits the old biplane. It seems almost fragile in comparison, a creature of another time. You can see the texture of the fabric stretched over its frame, the intricate network of bracing wires between its wings, the stark openness of its cockpit. It looks less like a weapon of war and more like a pioneering antique. But then your eyes are drawn to a series of small, faded markings painted on the side of the fuselage, just below the pilot's seat. They are simple silhouettes, a stark record of its deeds. There is the unmistakable outline of a battleship, its proud masts and gun turrets now just a ghostly emblem. Next to it, the low, menacing shape of a U-boat. And perhaps, most incongruously of all, the blocky form of a panzer tank. Each tiny painting is a ghost, a story of a mission flown into the teeth of enemy fire. It is in this artistic flourish, this quiet display of its deadly work, that the full irony and power of the swordfish's story is revealed. This humble collection of fabric and wire was a giant killer. Yet, the legacy of the flying coffin is not confined to the silent halls of museums. In a final, powerful testament to its incredible design and durability, a handful of these ancient aircraft remain airworthy today. This is perhaps the most remarkable, little-known fact of its entire story. Decades after the last of its high-tech contemporaries have been grounded forever, a few swordfish, meticulously maintained by dedicated enthusiasts and heritage flights in several countries, still take to the skies. To see one perform at a modern airshow is a breathtaking experience. As it flies past, its radial engine thrumming with its distinctive low-pitched drone, its slow, stately pace is a stark contrast to the screaming jets that share the sky. It is a living, breathing piece of history, a flying monument to a different era of courage and innovation. The fact that these aircraft, built in the 1930s, can still fly so safely and reliably is the ultimate proof of their unique survivability. The Stringbag endures, a timeless and iconic tribute to the brave crews who flew it, and a permanent, gentle mockery of the enemies who once dared to laugh at it. The story of the Fairey Swordfish is a powerful lesson in the nature of warfare, a narrative that elevates human courage and ingenuity above the cold calculus of technological superiority. It begins with the sound of laughter from the most advanced engineering minds of the era and ends with the silence of sunken fleets and shattered armor. The flying coffin, the Stringbag, the aircraft that should have been an easy kill, proved time and again that the assumptions of an enemy are a weapon to be used against them. Its success was a direct rebuke to the doctrine that newer is always better and faster is always more deadly. The true legacy of the swordfish is not found in its specifications, but in the hands and hearts of the men who flew it. They took a machine derided as obsolete and transformed it into a legend. They proved that in the hands of brave and resourceful people, even the most ungainly of tools can become an instrument of stunning, improbable victory. The mockery of the enemy, however loud, offers no defense against the quiet professionalism and daring of those who refuse to be defined by the limitations of their equipment. The swordfish was a paradox, a relic that became a revolution, forever proving one simple truth. This aircraft might have looked ridiculous. But no one was laughing when it returned from a mission.